Kia ora, good evening. A request for $180,000 for infrastructure at Bluff to support a yacht race from Auckland to Bluff was made to Environment Southland today. Submitting on Environment Southland's draft annual plan, Invercargill City Council Chief Executive Richard King and Invercargill Mayor Tim Shadbolt asked for funding from ES to use for the moorings and infrastructure that would be needed for the A to B yacht race in February. That funding, it was suggested, should come from Southport reserves or marine fee reserves. 11 submissions have been made in opposition to funding being given to the event and 6 have been made in support. A decision could be made as soon as tomorrow. And Sarah Bedford spoke to Invercargill City Council about the A to B yacht race and Council's submission.
I thought it was very reasonable and the questions they asked were extremely valid. And we hope that they'll be party to what we're trying to do.
How confident are you that they will come through with funding?
Probably at this stage 50-50, but we'll just have to wait and see. I think traditionally Environment Southland has concentrated mainly on environmental issues, but from our way of thinking, unless we have a very strong economy, then none of it will matter too much, because if we have people leaving and leaving Southland as they have in the past, heading off to Auckland, it's not going to be good for the region.
Now, you described this funding as being quite critical. Is there a plan B if you don't get it?
Well, we haven't looked at plan B. Obviously, we would have to look at plan B, because if we don't come up with our share, then the government won't be funding anything. So that's what's critical. And I think we're extremely lucky to get that $440,000 from the government, because they recognise the importance to New Zealand of this event, and we have to recognise the importance to Southland of this event.
Where else do you think you'd be looking to get that extra funding if you weren't to get it here?
Well, obviously we'd approach our other local authorities, and we'll just have to consider that when it happens.
Now, in terms of the race, you mentioned in your submission today that there was no financial stipulation on Auckland. Do you think that's fair?
But we were surprised by that. In some ways we can understand the government saying, well, look, Southland's a relatively small population, and Southland stands to benefit the most, because this is where the families come, the supporters come. So for each crew member, you can multiply that by 3 as to the people impact it'll have here. So we understand that we stand to benefit most, but I was surprised a bit.
So in terms of that economic benefit for Southland, obviously you've cited the Sydney to Hobart race. Do you think we could see the same sort of economic benefit? Yes,
I do, absolutely. You've got to remember though that currently I think the Sydney Hobart's been going 67 years, and Rex Capel from Venture Southland went to Hobart to gauge the economic impact of that event, and he came back and said it was absolutely fantastic how Hobart can benefit. And that's after 67 years, but I think we could coattail on that a lot quicker.
Fonterra has announced an increase in its payout for the first forecast of the 2013-14 season. The company today announced an opening forecast farm gate milk price of $7 per kilogram of milk solids, $1.20 higher than the current season's $5.80. Fonterra Chair John Wilson says the higher forecast reflects the strength of international dairy prices, which are expected to remain strong through 2014. Fonterra has also confirmed a higher advance rate schedule with an opening rate of $5 per kilogram of milk solids. Snow-covered areas in Southland are retreating to normal with mild conditions overnight, but plenty of snow remains on the hills as a reminder. A number of the South's schools were closed yesterday, mainly in northern and eastern Southland where snowfall was deepest. Gore Police said today, despite a number of crashes resulting from dangerous driving conditions, there were no reports of injury. Snow-laden trees proved a problem in northern Southland, and contractors clearing fallen trees from the road were pulled out for safety reasons, according to Southland District Council. Despite the snowy conditions, PowerNet reported no incidents of trees or weather causing power outages or lines damage. Southland has the lowest unemployment rate in the country in the March quarter, according to the Ministry for Business Innovation and Employment's Household Labour Force survey. The survey shows Southland's unemployment rate was 3.2%, while nationally it was 6.2%. Meanwhile, the employment rate in Southland was more than 71% in the quarter, while nationally it was close to 64%. Stay with us. After the break, why Norway is attempting to lay claim to a world record held by two men in Invercargill. Welcome back. A Norwegian novelist and a reporter are claiming to have beaten the world record for the longest television interview set by Invercargill Mayor Tim Shadbolt and Q Television's Tom Conroy last year. The Invercargill duo currently hold the Guinness World Record for their interview of 26 hours and 4 seconds last April. However, Norwegian Hans Olav Lulum was recently interviewed by a VGTV reporter for 30 hours, 1 minute and 44 seconds, with the pair laying claim to the title. A Guinness World Record official says the record is being examined and it could be 4 to 6 weeks before a decision's made on whether it will be accepted. Mr Shadbolt isn't conceding defeat yet.
Well, I'm not too sure about that. I mean, there were very strict rules when we ran our record. It was done in public, in a theatre. It was a full television production. You could go home and turn the television on and there we would be, free to air or on the Sky network. In this case, well, in a newspaper office with just a one-on-one situation, no representative from the Guinness Book of Records there to witness it. It's very strict rules associated with world record attempts such as this, and I'm not sure as yet that they've complied.
Is this a challenge to you, do you think, to go back and try and do better?
Yes, well, if the Guinness Book of Records accept underarm bowling is legally justifiable, then we will certainly be having another attempt at it and trying to break the new record, which is 30 hours.
What do you think you'll have left to talk about?
Oh, there's a whole range of activities. We'll certainly be talking about world record attempts and how they should be run. We'll be trying to understand the sort of edginess of some of the, and maybe it's to do with two little boys, where we had a Norwegian backpacker being run over by a couple of Kiwi hoons, and then they cut up the body with an axe and distributed it around the Catlins. Maybe they're still smarting from that, but we'll certainly be analysing the response to our television record, which was filmed in Russia and went all around the world, and we are slightly flattered that a country like Norway is seen fit to challenge little old New Zealand, and it shows the impact we've had around the world with that attempt.
The New Zealand economy is recovering, but it's gradual, and economic growth is expected to average 2.5% over the next few years. That's according to NZIER's latest quarterly prediction released today. The report says the underlying pace is gradual, boosted by one-offs like the Canterbury rebuild and rapid growth in household borrowing. Two key risks to the outlook are high house prices and households adding to already high levels of debt. Auckland housing is tagged as a risk, and the report suggests the Reserve Bank will look to lift the official cash rate next year to help halt increasing house prices. Invercargill and Bluff's water will continue to be fluoridated while City Council seeks independent advice and researches the issue before making a final decision. Invercargill City Council decided at a meeting last night to continue water fluoridation, but will research the issue before making a call to continue or stop. Debate on fluoridation of the water supply received more than 300 submissions during Council's draft annual plan process. Some claim it's ineffective in reducing tooth decay and is unsafe for human consumption, while others said there was no evidence of serious health outcomes when it meets recommended standards. The town's water has been fluoridated for over 50 years. A full-scale emergency response was underway at Southland's Emergency Operations Centre today. Dozens of emergency response staff swung into action to test how they would respond following an earthquake on the Alpine fault line. Sarah Bedford explains.
A mock magnitude 8 quake hit the Alpine fault line under Fox Glacier at 3 a.m. this morning, causing significant damage around the South Island. That was the scenario emergency response teams in Southland were responding to as part of Te Rapahapa, a civil defence exercise. Emergency Management Southland Group Controller Bruce Halligan says it's an important exercise.
I think it's a really very real scenario for us, and we would be significantly affected, and that makes the exercise very worthwhile from my point of view and everybody here and all our organisations. There would be very massive damage and quite significant potential for loss of life and major infrastructural damage.
Around 70 people in Southland were involved in the South Island-wide exercise, including police, fire service and local councils. The exercise was designed to test response in an alpine fault earthquake, with the focus on logistics, also a chance to test equipment and how everyone works together.
Big focus is around deploying resources to remote parts of Southland. In this scenario, there's been some significant damage around Milford, which is a very real possibility. There's lots of natural hazard issues around the Milford area, both earthquake and flooding, etc. So that's a key focus, is how we can coordinate getting those resources to where they need to be.
The exercise also saw lessons learned from the Christchurch earthquake being put into play.
I think that one thing that people now understand is that, if you have a major event like this, it's not going to be a 1 or 2 day exercise. It could be weeks, months and years, as has shown in Christchurch. So I think people have an understanding around that. That's very useful, and certainly there's been some important and valuable information gathered by the Ministry of Civil Defence and Emergency Management around how we should be responding to these things, and I guess the good and bad points from Christchurch. And don't get me wrong, the vast bulk of it was good, but there's certainly been some learning exercises from that as well.
The 12-hour exercise started at 9 a.m. this morning and saw the situation evolve through the day. Mr Halligan says it's important for emergency response staff to be prepared for the possibility of a real situation. Sarah Bedford, South Today News.
And that's it from news. Coming up in sport, zero fees Shark basketball action from round 6 of the NBL. From the news team, good night.